As we open today's program, I'll just quickly note Russ Tillerson right now is up next for the Democrats' anal probe on Capitol Hill. They tried this with Jeff Sessions yesterday and they failed miserably. Now it's Rex Tillerson's turn. But the big story that's brewing behind all of this today, you've got the media squawking for the last month about something called fake news, which is the how shall we put it, the talking point of the Democrat National Committee. But media working as a wholly owned subsidiary has been carrying the water for the Democrats on this argument because they're still looking for ways to blame their election loss on anyone but themselves. And the latest, and you've been hearing about this probably ad nauseum the last 24 hours. Oh, the Russians have compromising evidence on Donald Trump, and it is going to sink his presidency. Well, as the developments and the worm turns, as these things take place over the course of the last 24 hours, there are some what we might call exciting new developments. Among those, this one. There is a news organization out there that claims that this is a phony story and that it planted it to see what the mainstream media would do without any sources. Now, they would never do anything like this to Barack Obama. In fact, last night, while Mr. Obama was giving his farewell address, there were reporters tweeting that they were in tears because, of course, the Grand Mufti, their Lord and Savior, Barack Hussein Obama, he's going to be gone in just a week. Well, it's comeuppance time for mainstream media because if indeed this is a fraudulent story they're reporting about Donald Trump, Trump has scheduled a news conference, and I'm told we're going to hear it maybe just after 9 o'clock. I say maybe because, politicians, and Trump is now a politician, let's face it, they schedule these things, but then they have to huddle and hobnob with all of their people before they go out, and there are numerous delays. But our goal is to carry Trump's remarks live this morning. Now, we may not carry the news conference in its entirety, but we're going to carry some of it. This story, if you're wondering what the Russians supposedly had on him, and it turned out that it's a fabrication, was that Trump was cavorting with Russian prostitutes and that they were performing what's called a golden shower on the president-elect of the United States. And that this was the damaging evidence the Russians. Now, this is Donald Trump. He's been married 3 times. He's known to like women. All right, he's bragged about his conquests in his books, for crying out loud. He tells dirty jokes about women on buses to reporters. And this would somehow be compromising? Well, it's not true, first of all. But secondly, I don't know how this could be damaging to Donald Trump after what he's already talked about in his personal life publicly. But, as it turns out, Eric Erickson, who's not a Trump fan, made a great point at his website, The Resurgent, this morning. Trump is what is known as a germaphobe. Do you ever remember the stories about Howard Hughes? Howard Hughes was so worried about catching germs, he'd wear gloves or he'd try to avoid people. Donald Trump doesn't like to shake hands very often, which is why usually you see him giving a thumbs up instead when he comes across somebody that he knows. Donald Trump is concerned about, well, I joked about this on air last week. Every time I have gone to church over the last couple of months, I'm playing Russian roulette because during the handshakes, every few weeks I seem to come out of it with a cold or a flu. This is something that we're all aware of that does happen, especially this time of year. Do you think a guy who is concerned about shaking somebody else's hands because it might transmit germs would allow a couple of Russian prostitutes to pee on him? Come on. This is the type of stuff, and the media has done this without any sources, any credible sources. Now, you're going to hear them when they realize that they've been set up and that they are the people who are promoting fake news. You're going to hear them start whining and crying and claiming that, well, it's not our fault, we were set up. Just like Dan Rather when he reported the phony story about George W. Bush's service in the Air National Guard. After it was discovered that it was a phony story, Rather, instead of saying, gee, I got duped, Rather instead blamed his company for firing him because he didn't verify it, which was probably grounds for being fired, and his ratings were terrible anyway. CBS was looking for a reason to kick him to the curb long before that. But then he claimed, well, the story must have been invented by Karl Rove, no evidence that it ever was, and planted with me so that it would make me look bad. Well, dude, you're the one who took the bait. Nobody forced you to do it. You took the bait because you wanted the story to be true and you wanted to discredit President Bush at the time. And this was your means to an end. And now we've got it writ large across the entire media. The resignations should start coming in. In a sane world, the resignations would start coming in this afternoon. CNN would be the hardest hit because they really went what you might call stones to the wall on this one yesterday and just kept trumpeting it, no pun intended, throughout the afternoon and evening. And now they've all gotten out of bed this morning and gone back to work and discovered, holy smokes. So Trump's news conference should be one for the ages, which is why we'd like to bring some of that to you a little later in the show. And we are expecting it sometime after 9 o'clock Mountain Time today, and we'll try our best to do that. Some of the other things that we have coming up this morning, going to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio. Dr. Tripp, of course, here from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, Idaho. He joins us on Wednesday mornings, and here one of his associates. But he's talking today about how to bounce back from the holidays, for health reasons. Because the holidays are they're very rough on a lot of us. Even though some of us are on a diet, someone tries and puts a piece of pecan pie in front of you. What do you say? Sorry, I will not eat your sugar. Where's the fork? So he's going to talk to us about this morning and give us some rundowns on that. But I also wanted to mention his office, located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office right here in Twin Falls, Idaho. And a couple of other quick notes, too, as well, before we're going to take an early break here this morning during this segment of the program, just because I'm doing what you call a little bit of on-air speculation about potential guests today. But I also wanted to mention you do want to hear the Donald Trump news conference or parts of it. This is history being made today. But if you can't hear it or you're having difficulty hearing it, please feel free, speaking of doctors, to get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. She has a new hearing device available which works directly with the brain and is for most people, a better way to hear, better than any other previous aid that's on the market. She's also offering a 2-week free trial. So if you'd like to actually schedule an appointment, give her office a telephone call. The telephone number is 312-0957. That's 312-0957, or go to her website, mountharrisonaudiology.com. So those are just some of the things, of course, we're going to be talking about a little later in the program today. As I say, the Trump news conference should be one for the ages. As I said, this is the day that the media may have finally taken the last nail and hammered it into its own coffin. And I've been telling people all along that are willing to listen, by the end of calendar year 2017, most of your old-line newspapers won't even have print editions. They're going to be blaming all of this on the internet and competition from fake news and on competition from cable. Look, these things have been around 20 or 30 years now. One of my old bosses, David Schumacher, who worked for many, many years at CBS and ABC News, and before that had worked, I think, at the World Herald in Omaha, Nebraska. He had been a newspaper man, too, at one point. But I remember him telling me many, many years ago, media is going to die because of its bias, not because of what's competing against it. And all of the death throes that we've been hearing about and that we'll hear more about, they'll try to point fingers elsewhere and blame people. But if they did it to themselves, there's no other way to look at this and say otherwise. And that's something that we all have to, I think, keep in mind at this particular stage of the game. I do want to point out it's 8:15. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. We're at 35, and it is a little easier driving today because many of the icy patches on the road have been eliminated. Well, partly because we had people out plowing them, but the warm weather overnight was really a godsend. The trouble is it doesn't last because the weather is going to take a turn for the worse starting tonight down into the teens, which means things are going to be slippery again tomorrow morning in spots. And then for like the next 3 or 4 days, overnight lows are only going to be in the single digits. So we're not out of this mess just yet, like many of us perhaps thought we would be, which a friend of mine said. Actually, he was our guest yesterday talking about inaugurations. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil, as he told me a couple of weeks ago, we were having a conversation on the telephone one day, and he lives in a beach resort. I mean, it's beautiful there. And even occasionally they get some snow, but it's beautiful there generally year-round. And he was saying to me on the telephone, Christmas had ended, and he was saying, yep, now's the bad part of the year. He said, January and February just stink. And even though the tourists all go away where he lives, especially in these winter months, and you've got more space in restaurants, a lot of those restaurants simply close down for a couple of months. So for a couple of months, he's got a lot of cold beach to look at. You can't go swimming. And when the wind blows, it's like getting sandblasted if you're walking on the beach. Trust me, I know this from my own experience. And so for 2 months, it's doldrums. And that even happens in nice places in this country, not just here in the cold Northwest. Although the cold, bitter Northwest this year is obviously colder and bitterer than it is many other times a year. And one other quick note, since I was talking a couple of minutes ago about some of our fine sponsors on the air, and I referenced bouncing back from the holidays, and that generally means losing weight, friends. I do want to remind you that I have been, and I had my shake this morning mixed with a few blueberries, the Total Body Transformation System. I've been involved with this since late September. I've dropped over 50 pounds because of the use of it, and I've been reminding people if you'd like to know more about it, please listen to me for a moment. My personal experience can be your personal experience, and it is the personal experience of many other people. The company that developed the Total Body Transformation System has been in business over 2 decades. They've got an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau. It's backed up by leading scientific researchers at universities such as Tufts, Cornell, and Columbia. It has a couple of patents for reducing waist circumference and helping you rev up your metabolism, which is also going to be important in any diet. It's proven to burn 6 times more fat, and you'll lose 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise alone. It is a meal replacement, but it's actually better than many of the meals many of us actually probably were eating before we started the diet. And you get a healthy amount of calories every day. You still get to eat the things you like. You just can't sit down and eat the entire bag of chips. That was one of my downfalls. The average participant will lose 22 pounds in just 60 days and 4 inches off their waist. And I wanted to point out, too, the ingredients are healthy for you. As I said, maybe healthier than anything you've already had. And the cost is also comparable to what you'd pay for groceries. That's the one big question people have, because some of these diets, they're great diets, but they're going to cost you a second mortgage. This one doesn't. It's simply what you're using. The replacement is about the same as your grocery tab, what you'd be skipping when you're not having those meals. And I'd like to point out, too, it's backed up with a full money-back guarantee. You can find out more by getting in touch with Don Chandler. He's the marketing executive behind the Total Body Transformation System. He also lost 50 pounds on this particular diet. So he's a convert as well. The telephone number, 208-731-3560. Once more, Don Chandler, and that's a local number, 731-3560. Short break coming up. We've got more with Bill Colley on Top Story on the way in just a few minutes on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And as I said, if we can, we'd like to take some of the Donald Trump news conference, his rebuttal on the Russia story, coming up perhaps in less than an hour. Talking about afflictions of the media a few minutes ago on the show. Did you see where a liberal reporter from MTV following or during the hearings yesterday with Jeff Sessions in front of the Senate committee, did you see where a liberal reporter from MTV said Sessions should take the little Asian girls back to Toys R Us, saying this is clearly a racist trying to cover up his actions by posing with little Asian girls on his lap before the hearing? Well, that guy got schooled afterwards. Jake Tapper, who I'll give credit, he works over at CNN. I believe he was at ABC before that, but Jake Tapper, fairly stand-up guy when it comes to mainstream media, and it's rare that happens, but he pointed out, he said, hey, dummy, those are Jeff Sessions' grandchildren. Jeff Sessions has a daughter. She's got a husband who is of Asian ancestry. That's why the children might look Asian, the grandchildren. Can you believe this? And, it just shows you the illiteracy among the American left in this country, and they just keep digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. 36, it's 8:24. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I mentioned the cold weather a little earlier, returning. Not quite as cold, but still cold over the next few days. Once again, this is taking a toll on many of your heating units, and if that be the case and you need to work on the efficiency or you need a quick repair, you've got to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out and they'll get the job done right at Ramsey Heating and Electric, and they'll make sure it's done right the first time. Problem-free cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number, 678-0459. That's 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Speaking of Jake Tapper, he was appearing with Liberal Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota. She's Al Franken's opposite. Well, I won't say opposite. They think the same. And she's trying to cover up this story about Russia and, trying to make it look like Donald Trump is wholly responsible and therefore not the legitimate president of the United States. Tapper's having none of it.
To be perfectly candid, isn't this all a huge failure of the Obama administration in terms of cybersecurity and foreign relations? Under his watch, all this happened to his party and to the detriment of his would-be successor, Hillary Clinton.
I think it's easy to cast blame. You can look at a lot of things as this has happened to other countries as well.
Jake, you're no fellow traveler at all. Gosh, I was told that you work for the Clinton News Network. You'd be throwing softballs my direction. Well, I'm never coming back here. Coming up on 826, telephone number for reaching our program today, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. I've got 37. We'll drop down into the teens tonight, and we have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next.
This fake news or making it up has been going on a long time. The New York Times, during the Vietnam War, was reporting just the opposite of what was actually happening in Vietnam. There's a book called All the News That Fits by Herman Dinsmore. I've got a copy of it, and believe me, he was sending back reports that we were winning in Vietnam. Guess how the New York Times was reporting it? They were the leading cheerleaders for the anti-war movement, along with the Washington Post, of course. The same people that are coming out with the fake news and all this stuff now. So this has been going on for decades and most of our lifetimes. And, they just don't, they've finally been found out, thanks to the internet and people like yourself that point this stuff out, that they just make it up. Like recently, now they've turned it around that the incident where the disabled person was attacked by 4 black people.
I was thinking of that.
And they turned it around. I mean, this is what they've been doing for a long time, people. Just totally ignore anything that comes from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Bloomberg News. It's all fake news, or it's propaganda, or just flat out lies.
Well said, and I thank you much for the call. Our caller, by the way, is going to be a guest of ours sometime in the next few weeks. Adrian is his name, and Adrian is, liberals think they're the smartest people in any room. Adrian has a PhD, he's a conservative, and he knows what he's talking about. He's done his reading. And so I asked him a couple of weeks ago if he could pop in. He's got a couple of business things he's got to take care of in the meantime, but when he's done with that, he's going to sit in on the show with us one day, maybe spend half an hour to an hour with us. And I'm looking forward to that because it's nice to have somebody on the air who can just sit here and break all of this down. But you know what? He's got the historical context that he brings to it as well. Speaking of what's going on with the way the media is treating the situation on Capitol Hill, of course, media is telling you that all of the Trump nominees are evil people because, well, gee willikers, they've made money during their lives. And money's a crime, obviously, to media and the fellow travelers. Ted Cruz defending Jeff Sessions yesterday. Take a listen to this, and he puts the liberals and the socialists in their place.
When the Department of Justice used Operation Choke Point to target legal businesses because they disagreed politically with those businesses, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama Justice Department sent millions of dollars of taxpayer monies to sanctuary cities that were defying federal immigration law, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration refused to enforce federal immigration laws and unilaterally rewrote those laws, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration released tens of thousands of criminal illegal aliens, including rapists and murderers, into the general population, Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Department of Justice signed off on the Obama administration paying a nearly $2 billion ransom to Iran, contrary to federal law, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration ignored and rewrote provision after provision of Obamacare contrary to the text of the law, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration signed off on illegal recess appointments that the Supreme Court had to strike down unanimously, the Democrats on this committee were silent. And when the Obama administration released 5 Guantanamo terrorists without the required notification of Congress, the Democrats on this committee were silent.
Yeah, we've got Dr. Jonathan Tripp on the way in just a couple of minutes. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. It's 8:30. Right now it's 36. This is Top Story.